I would like to invite our esteemed panel members, Ms. 𝗘𝘀𝗁𝗁, HR Leader and former Director HR, Perfertti van Melle, Ms. Madhu Menon, Director National Head Talent Acquisition, Deloitte, India, Ms. Roona Sen-Gupta, HR Head, 𝗣𝗿 Minerals, India, and the chairperson for this session, Mr. 𝗘𝗃𝗁𝗁𝗆, CEO, TalentWorx. Can we have a huge round of applause for our esteemed panel members? Come on, everyone. I request Mr. 𝗘𝗃 to please lead the session for all of us.
So while this morning has been quite interesting in terms of a lot of questions and answers, I was just trying to kind of make it sound a bit interesting by checking what are the latest quotes that have come on here. And one of that was that enough has been talked about artificial intelligence. Okay, let's talk about natural stupidity. And the reason why, and then it was intrigued why people are talking about stupidity and artificial intelligence in one go, and that's when I realized that eventually any technology that gets built is created, delivered, and used by human beings. And with the kind of esteemed panel that I have got on the podium today, I think it's all about how they have been able to build careers of millions of folks who are human beings and human beings meant to help. Now, while there is no doubt that artificial intelligence has helped a lot in the economic /production /financial upgrade, but what has to be talked is about some other aspects which are more human intrinsic, aspects which typically get ignored. And that's probably what we would like to touch upon based on the commission thanks to the leaders that we have got. The interesting piece about the leaders over here is that they have been exposed to multiple facets of human resources, people development, and I think that will give a lot of insights to us in terms of how we are going to understand a bit more about it. So, Madhu, my first question is to you. You have worked, of course, with a lot of consulting firms. You have worked with Ernst & Young, Deloitte. I've been working with knowledge workers, as we call it. Now, a couple of sessions and speakers did talk about the whole artificial intelligence being used to leverage a lot of processes and parts of the filter process or evaluation. Well, evaluation is just one part of it, but maybe if you could give us some idea about how different tools and processes can really eliminate the bias that we talk about in terms of identifying people, developing people. And the bias can be based on gender, bias can be based on the kind of backgrounds they come from, or multiple other filters. I mean, ultimately, inclusivity and diversity is what we will talk about. So, in your experience, especially the knowledge workers that you've worked with, how different tools and processes have helped in eliminating this kind of bias?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, 𝗘𝗃, for this question. As you rightly said, Deloitte is knowledge partner for various clients. We really go out and really discuss this subject in length. And very clearly, every process where GenAI or in systems where the GenAI is applied to functions, it requires a lot of checks in terms of the advanced algorithms which is used and the adoption of it where it should not be biased. In Deloitte and the processes that we are doing, we are very cognizant of the fact that the way the processes are and the way that it should be adopted, there are no biases, and it is cognitive bias, rather than having only gender bias, which is the subject generally people know about, right? So the first thing first, what is important for it is to define the set criteria of having the data set to be very clearly designed, which is as per the criteria of that function. For an example, talent acquisition. If talent acquisition, we have to really look out or scout for talent, right? So it has to be neutral to any gender or any kind of a bias, which is DEI. So any job description that's been created, which is a data set, which is fed in the GenAI, is supposed to be something which is neutral in by nature, right? So similarly, in terms of the criteria that is set to stack rank the kind of the filtering that we do for candidates, it is not basis their background and everything. It is more from the skills and experience that they have. So on and so forth. Every element of talent acquisition or with regards to experience, any candidate who comes to an organization for a possible opportunity, how should we look at Gen AI to help them to have a better experience, for us to take their feedback, but in a way also make sure that the kind of feedback that we are taking, we are not basically biased in that. So there's some checks and balances, any process and everything is required. I think there are three major elements that we apply, and this comes from, of course, the knowledge that our organization has. One starting point is where we have to really be very clear in creating the criteria and to adopt to those criteria. The second being where we have to basically check the kind of counter facts which are there in terms of the fairness that we are doing. So to do that, audit committee, which is an independent authority, which really goes back and sees the kind of inputs that we have got through those processes, is really checked as an independent eye to mitigate the kind of risk of being biased, any kind of bias. Now, because it's evolving and we may get these biases every now and then, it's not that you will stop after some time. You have to continuously, consistently build on really checking on this. So what is very much important is to be very transparent to the user side of it, both from the external talent and from an internal hiring manager standpoint. Keep on educating them as to what is important for them to be fair, and having more and more programs to educate and let them know that what will help us to become more, say, addressed towards the biases which can creep in. So I think overall these three elements are very much important, which we have adopted, which really helps in eradicating, basis of biases. Having said that, it's something which is a journey. Of course, we all go through it, and there are some mindsets which we can't change, but it's a slow-moving journey of changing mindset, and I think we are in that right now. Thank you.
Madhu, that reminds me of a couple of practices that I have heard, where generally maybe the name or the entire name, the location where the candidates come from, ideally are not reflected to on a lot of CVs actually.
Yes.
While they're getting evaluated. But thanks for putting it through, because
so that basically comes back to the criteria. The criteria eliminates those points, because we then double click only on the skills and the experience, and then the other parts are not there. Very clearly, those are the elements where the criteria itself in the back end of the data set is basically running, so that we are eliminating the biases there.
No, that's helpful. In fact, I hope that these kind of practices can be deployed across all the industries and sectors. But Ronan, I'll come to you for the next question, and specifically you are in an industry which includes a wide section of people across different segments. Now, I have always been hearing this from a lot of people, that people work for people. I mean, they don't work for organizations. And that absolutely establishes the fact that how emotionally equipped you are as a leader will eventually define the journey of an employee in an organization. Now, we have trainings, we have modules, we have processes that have been incorporated for a while to execute and build leaders with a higher level of EQ. But from your perspective, do you think that technology, AI in particular, but any other technology or format, has been able to actually build up those quotients for leaders in particular?
Absolutely fabulous question to start off with, because yes, from this morning session that I've heard, everyone's spoken about AI. AI is still artificial intelligence, which has been created by a human brain, which is original. And a human being is not going to be evaluated in future only on the basis of IQ. Whole individual comes into picture only when you are seeing that individual with his IQ, EQ, CQ, and his creative quotient. So when we hire people today, it is no longer only psychometric assessments. So if you need to go closer to reality in terms of what is the emotional quotient required for a person to deliver and conduct himself in the manner that this organization expects a certain employee to behave in the organization, I need to do the assessment in that level itself, covering all these four aspects. And the most critical factor among all the four is the emotional quotient. And the emotional quotient defines whether the individual actually brings in originality, the authenticity of the individual is reflecting from the interview phase. Now with AI, I must tell you, this is a boon to HR, because there have been a lot of biases wherein people, when they hear the other person's relatable experiences being shared, I tend to get biased in terms of, okay, he has had similar experience, so we might as well have this person on board. But with AI, with specific questions, the kind of authentic responses that come in are evaluated, and that makes the decision making much more simpler as leaders. And when you are having a person joining in with this particular emotional quotient, you know the kind of team he is going to be addressing. And especially from the manufacturing background that I come from, I deal with white collar as well as the blue collar. I need to see the leaders connect much more with the blue collar to be able to accept any change. So for us to drive a change, as much as AI has helped us as a technology to HR, how do I make it usable and find value for a blue collared employee working in a shift? He says, I need a human being to talk to. But again, to drive that acceptance, you need a person. And it was only possible through your change ambassadors in the organization. So the change ambassadors were trained and showing the value this technology brings in terms of the responsiveness of HR. Like I heard the earlier speaker, Ms. Megha, in the previous session, she did mention it actually gives us much more time to think as leaders on the strategic part of it, rather than actually spending too much time on transactional jobs. If even an associate sitting in the shop floor would like to have a query resolved, he just doesn't need to today walk up to the HR floor and ask an HR colleague. He has a bot where his basic queries can be addressed. The time is saved. He sees the value, but to show the value, the person who you identify as the change ambassador plays a key role, and that's where your emotional intelligence actually plays a good, important part of our business today.
Well, right, Madhu was saying earlier that it's a long journey. I think EQ itself is a long journey in terms of adoption and not just AI. Well, you were talking about white collar, blue collar. Well, that's a separate part of challenge. I think, mentioned with you, the challenges have been different. So you represent Perfertti, you worked with Reckitt before. Now, these are global brands, but when it comes to their products portfolio, especially in India, general trade, modern trade, the entire category management, I think the products are used by people across the segment, across the demographic. Which means that while the consumers are across the country, so are the employees who are driving it. Whether they are sales folks or trade marketing or anything of that sort. The question eventually comes that the bias that we were just discussing with Madhu, the same bias would be there when you are trying to create a culture which is between the urban population and the rural population, because they are two completely different sets. Of course, the gap is bridging in terms of what you call urban and rural, but still there will be something which will be urban in nature and something will always remain rural, thanks to the landscape. How do you think technology can actually help in bridging this gap, which is there between absolutely different economic segments, cultural segments, which are purely because of the kind of region these employees come from?
Yeah. So I'll break your question into two parts. One is the country as a whole, and how do we bridge the entire urban-rural divide. And this is more, and the second one from the employee perspective, how HR helps. So the first one, India has a lot of people, and therefore we say that we have a lot of talent. But if you really see the usable talent, that is very, very less. Now, can the organization only bridge the gap, or can the government only bridge the gap? I don't think so. It's a collaborative effort that both the government and the organizations have to do. Now, there are a few ways that they can cater to. One is how do we really skill the people sitting in the rural, 10,000 miles away? Do they have the infrastructure? So, how do we build that infrastructure? Do they have the bandwidth, the internet bandwidth? Or can we create some digital hubs? Or how can we leverage the mobile telephony in a better way? Because India has the highest penetration in the rural segment. So how do we use that is very, very important. Secondly, how do we reskill them? And when we talk about reskilling, are we using multilingual platforms? So why don't we leverage that to ensure these people are skilled? How can we create platforms where they are mentored by somebody sitting in, a high-end corporate office in the urban center, but still that person in the rural area through the digital hub or through the hub and spoke model. Companies can set up their small offices in rural areas or in semi-urban towns where people can come in, but they can still leverage the same kind of information, the same kind of mentoring, the same kind of skilling that anybody in a majority in a metro center or in a highly urban center can. Can we collaborate that? We already have foundations like 𝗧𝗵Premji Foundation, Bharti Foundation, or the 𝗘𝘀𝗁𝗃𝗃 Foundation, which is very, very focused on education and building these skills. And only then I think we can completely say that we'll bind the entire country into one inclusive platform and really, really benefit from the skills and the population that we have. So that is one area of how you can bridge the urban and the rural divide. Now I come from a perspective of HR and within the company employees. Like you rightly said, I have somebody sitting in Raipur, somebody sitting in Patna, somebody, all across the regions people are selling. And if I look at my HR structure and given the cost constraints, I have only one HR person, say for a South region, right, or a West region, and there are 250 employees there. Now, how does my one HR person cater to everyone? It can't, right? One conversation takes about 3-4 hours, and the other, I also want that HR person to do higher, value-added stuff, strategic stuff. So I leverage AI to connect with these people proactively, and then the nice part of AI is that you can dice the data. You can connect with them through a bot, say at early stage, mid-career stage, any number of data sets that I can have. I can ask them questions, do a dipstick survey, and see what are the responses, and actually get to know where are the pain points much before than when the employee takes up the courage and come to the HR person to talk, right? And then that way I can truly make HR transformational and more proactive, and the decisions that we take will be more relevant rather than generic decisions, because we all do employee engagement surveys or employee sat surveys. How much data can this do, right? That's not proactive, that's actually quite reactive. But using AI to get the employee data of what the sentiment data that they are going through and proactively coming to them is where the game changes.
You especially talk about the cost part, and I think with the global organizations it's easy to cover up that cost if you really want to build a hub and spoke model, but I'm sure that luxury is not with all the organizations. But we have been talking about anti-AI and for the last 3 years or 4 years actually, not just 3-4 hours. That's what I feel. And I always believe that it's easy for us to talk about it because we have reached a certain point in our career trajectory where we are exposed to a lot of information around what's happening around the globe. Now, for the audience, I think it's very important to know that you three come from very different kind of industries. While Kanchan, you represent FMCG industry where, as I said, the urban and rural divide is huge. Madhu, you come from a pure play knowledge workers where they know more about tech than even the support functions do know. And now you are representing manufacturing, which is again a different world altogether, especially when it comes to the plants and where the actual operations and manufacturing happens. Now, while we might talk about AI and products and adoption and what can be done, the ultimate end user is the guy sitting at the other side. And for him or her, it might be difficult because they might have not been that exposed. Rather, they are many employees who are trying to make ends meet, and their understanding is just to ensure that they work and they just finish their job and they get done. The question is to all of you, and Kanchan, we can start with you, that how can you ensure, or how an organization can ensure that while the delivery from top down is absolutely acute and they understand how it has to be done, the adoption from the other end is equally in sync, seamless, or at least starts from somewhere?
I think you apply the same change management principles like you would do for any other change. Whether it's within the organization top down or whether it's at the other end, you need to create those experiences, those success stories, so that they realize that this is the way to go. And it could be through training, it could be through like somebody in the earlier panel said, talking about in various forums about the benefits of it, or it could be about even mandating people to do, because sometimes you don't want to do that change because in your mind think you won't be able to do it, but once you're mandated and you kind of train yourself to do it, things become easy. So I think it's just about having the skill and the will to do it, and as HR, as organizations, as governments, we need to continuously and repetitively enable them to do it, and they get used to it.
Keep on constantly trying and striving at it. Madhu, in your case, the problem is far difficult because all of these guys have been attuned to technology for years. They are knowledge workers. They know more about AI than maybe I know or the other support functions know. How would you think the right ways to deal with them in terms of coaching them, guiding them about the bias or the other aspects of AI? Because they know about the code behind it actually.
I think in the industry I think everybody is aware and they somehow know what's the impact of being biased or maybe not adopting the technology to the T, right? So I don't think so that's an issue. It's again a change management which it's something which is my will and my understanding that the impact of it is larger and it's a larger impact for a longer time. So if we are not into it and we are not doing it to the T, I think we will lose the battle, right, overall. Whether it is talent attraction or talent development or overall performance management or experience for that matter. So I think in our kind of industry, I think it's much more in terms of only keep on reiterating the fact what is the impact of it and showing them the kind of the wins which comes as a use case of various processes which really make them realize and are relatable to the process change, which can help them to realize that it is very important aspect to really adopt that and take this forward. And many areas where we are right now in the nascent stage, but we are evolving in terms of those adoptions and all of that. What we have seen and which is the experience so far is that there is a will, it's just a mindset which will take a little longer, and our efforts from the talent side or HR side is to reiterate the benefits of it and keep on really pushing it hard for it to be adopted. I think, and it will not stop here. I think it is a continuous journey because never that we will be able to say that it's to the ideal stage. It will keep on having new versions and we have to really go by it. I think the way the consultants or the people in consultings are or the techies are, they are themselves also looking for them to be relevant in the market. They want to upskill themselves, they want to skill themselves, and I feel that the intent comes very clearly. It's just a matter of bridging that gap from our side to keep on reiterating and pushing that little hard.
I just heard the undertone that they have to adapt or they'll have to figure out what next, because I think in one of the sessions someone did talk that we won't probably lose jobs to AI, but people who know how to use AI. That's fair. Manufacturing, different world altogether. How do you deal with it?
So I'd like to start off with giving a classic example which we actually implemented. So our topic was also creating inclusivity, right? So I remember that when we had to do a complete assembly process in the manufacturing plant, and we thought we do not hire. Earlier we had challenges that women don't work in manufacturing, but today that is not a challenge. You find metro engineers, you have construction workers where there are high infrastructure projects being handled by women. So we have women working in our manufacturing floor. But what was difficult for us to get on board was people with disabilities. So we actually fed in every process of our manufacturing and got an AI to actually analyze and give us the roles where a person, even with a physical disability, would be able to do. So we have now multiple roles which can be actually done by people with disabilities as well. That could be hearing or speech, but they are now able to explore those options. It wouldn't have been possible if I were to do it individually, go and identify it. It is a much more scientific way of doing it. objective way of doing it, and giving it to people in a manner that in manufacturing nothing comes beyond safety. So as long as I give the safety culture within the organization the utmost importance, any process gets accepted. And that I can very proudly say, when we implemented this process, my entire global organization told me, you are going to be taking a beating in your Peakon survey scores this year. Last year we scored 8.7 on our employee engagement score. I said, if you give value to people, people value it and would like to take it to the next level. And this year we closed it at 9.2. So that wouldn't have been possible if the technology is not here to show value to people.
I think for people who believe that these employment surveys are passé, I think it's a great example. Definitely. What I would like to do is maybe while we have specially talked about the industry-based questions, and of course I had a couple of specific questions, maybe I'll take a closing remark from all of you in terms of in your understanding, and not essentially from an organization or industry that you represent, but from what you have been hearing about AI in your own domain, in your own experience. What is that one learning that you have had that you want to implement and you want the future leaders to pick up, that you would like them to implement in their career journey? Aruna, you can.
So as leaders, we need to
With a lot of youngsters over here as well, and a lot of budding leaders actually in the space, so it will be interesting for them.
I guess leaders just are the biggest change ambassadors themselves. And the buy-in comes in, you can give any process, you can give the best of technology, unless and until people see the connect between the human beings as to why the leaders are there. So again, I'll give another example from my own organization, how this works effectively is, earlier HR department is where people had to come and get their queries resolved. Today, most of their basic queries are answered by the bots, but we have the leadership team who goes and does the safety walk in the shop floor to get the pulse as to how these newly introduced technology actually helps them. So people accept only when there is a human connect, because it is your processes that is getting improvised thanks to the people who are giving the input. They are giving us constant feedback how they want the process to be improvised. And if you have technology to enable that, why not? I think leaders need to be much more open to change rather than the people who you want them to actually accept it.
Madhu?
Okay. I will not talk about leaders because I think all the leaders now have realized that obviously Gen AI is here to stay and we have to really be in that game to be successful. I'll talk from the youth which is coming ahead and who are looking at their careers, and very clearly they've been using these tools. You know, read about something which has been released yesterday or day before yesterday on the skill development which comes from the Gen AI, which is very important for all of us to understand how important for us is to embrace the entire change of Gen AI and the digitalization, which is, you know, a revolution in itself. If we are not in the game, then we are out of the game, and therefore that's the only message that I'll say, that it is across leadership till the youth, where you have to keep on looking at avenues of skilling and reskilling yourself. If you do not see that coming every 6 months, because we've not been now seeing any time when it is constant, we are not seeing a plateau, we are just seeing that it is disruption. And if you do not adopt that and keep on revisiting your skills currently and looking for adjacent skills that you can embrace and adopt, you will be out of the game. And therefore, the only advice I can say is that, and what I have learned for myself as well, that to be in the game, I have to really challenge myself and look at that as an opportunity rather than looking at it as a threat. So that's it.
Thanks. Opportunity, not threat.
Yes.
I'll just build on her. I think AI is here to stay and only make our lives better. We had a question earlier whether it's going to take our jobs. No, it's not going to take our jobs, but it's going to replace the jobs with something that you're doing now with something that you'll do differently now. So let's not be wary of it. Let's be very, very positive and embrace it. And like she said, you know, it's not about what's in your heart, whether you want to do it or not. The need of the hour is to skill yourself, to look forward to AI and see what more you can do. And I think that's the way we need to approach AI.
Thank you. I don't know whether they're cut jobs or not, but I think three of you will get a lot of series from the audience, especially the youngsters who are sitting listening to you. But thank you very much to all the ladies, the leaders over here. Thanks for the patience that you had to listen to all these ideas and thoughts. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alok, and a heartfelt thanks to our esteemed panelists for sharing such valuable insights with all of us. Well, now I would like to invite on stage Mr. Gaurav Arora, founder and chief inspirer xMonks, to felicitate our esteemed panel members.
Ms. Sruna Sen Gupta, please come forward. Now I request Mr. 𝗬𝗏𝗀𝗃, please come forward, sir. Thank you so much.